Well, let us continue. Labels. With regards to labels, it is possible to take your knife and gently lift the edge or corner of the label to see if the wood under the label is of the same color as the surrounding wood. If so, the label could be a new addition. Wood darkens with age in general when exposed to air and light. Sometimes 18th century billheads had an emblem printed in the center of the page. This could be cut out and used as a label. Also, an original label should show wear and fraying at the sides and edges. Fresh cut paper can be examined under the microscope to determine age and type of cut, a slice or a ripping action. Very important. Labels exposed to air and light become brittle also. Original paper labels, 18th century, early 19th century, unless they are in a protected spot, rarely remain intact on furniture that has been used for over a century or two. The wood moves, the glue dries underneath, the paper may lift, and the edges become vulnerable to breaking off. When they do, the wood underneath, paler than the surrounding wood, because it has been protected from air and light, hence oxidation, begins to darken. If bits of paper lift up and break off at different times, wood of various shades may show around the remnant of the label, with the lightest tones in the areas of the most recent losses. So now let's speak about branding. Branded furniture until recent years was assumed to have been marked by the maker. Many men, primarily shippers, within the late 18th and early 19th centuries, performed the beginning of America's international commerce. They used branding irons and or hammer dies to mark not only the shipping crates, but most household items prior to the voyage. An owner's name can enhance an antique, sometimes by locating a town and suggesting an appropriate date of the furniture being made. The name surely adds to the object's desirability and increases its price significantly. In some circles, the tendency is still to see a maker's name in each newly discovered mark. Old mistakes endure. Once an imaginary cabinet maker has been created out of a whole cloth, he clings to life by every thread. In the 19th century, the use of makers' brands as well as stencils or printed labels became commonplace. Many producers of Windsors and other volume production chairs branded their work, using mostly a first initial and a last name. Try to ascertain if the mark is that of a maker or an owner or a shipper. Look for confirming or cross-examining information. If the information you seek is not available in any printed source, contact an expert in the field. There are many, and they are not in hiding. Just search the web, it's quite easy. No doubt, in the early 20th century, many antique buyers was sold a bill of goods, so to speak, when told that a bill of sale, or the upper part of one, a billhead, belonged with an antique being sold. If a bill of sale is presented to you as an antique, be particular. Number one, do not accept a cut-off portion of a larger bill as acceptable documentation. The bill should be intact, as a document of its age can be expected to be. Number two, require that the bill have as solid as a history as the histories of the furniture being purchased. The latter must be traceable from the date on the bill. Number three, accept only a bill that is ambiguous, one that is clearly unambiguous, that is clearly associated with the furniture it purports to document. It is hard to prove that a bill of sale has not been in fashion in recent years. And as trends are cyclical, bills as documentation may return to fashion, engendering more doctored up bills. Be on guard for all fraudulent identification, be in script, labels, brands, or bills. So let's have a word about styles. Whereas today's collectors search for the pristine, early in the 20th century, collectors sought the unusual, equating the odd with the outstanding. They enthusiastically pursued unique examples and fell prey to altered antiques. Furniture craftsmen alert to the desires of customers for the eccentric made an industry of making the irregular. So when presented with the unusual, look at rarity and migrate back to the basic, traditional, hardcore styles. In antique furniture, rare pieces are usually pieces that never were. Genuine pieces fall within a style period and or a design tradition. Each reflects the era and the area of its origin. Smart collectors look for the typical, and if they can afford it, for the exemplary, outstanding object that is the best an example of design, but not a deviant from it. Therefore, look for the typical and stay away from the unusual. And let's talk a bit about training your eye. To spot a pristine antique, you need to have an educated eye that can detect telltale deviations from the norm in style and design. One must learn the different furniture styles, idiosyncratic variations from different regions, and basic regional design characteristics from America, Europe, and Britain. Eye training is rigorous, for it demands looking at as many examples as humanly possible. Examine in all major museums, including small historical museums, societies, that contain pristine examples of local origin. This is a good place to start. Review antique stores long before you are prepared to buy. Look at auction previews, old catalogs before you are skilled enough to be a participant in the actual sale. And study books and the internet for the offerings to access a multitude of other examples. The following are 4 styles of training steps. Number 1, the quick survey. To study furniture, it is important to become familiar with at least some of the terms for its several parts. As you look over the photos, focus on the parts as well as each piece of furniture as a whole. Unfortunately, older books, though not only the older ones, contain much that is flawed or fraudulent. Wallace Nutting's Furniture Treasury, probably the most frequently pursued book on the antique furniture market, look at the whole, look at the object as a whole, then at several details. How does each contribute to the general appearance? Successful designs integrate components so that they enhance the whole. Even unsuccessful designs exhibit some patterns. Relationships, parts that will be an equivalent to the whole. Patterns of designs change over time and over distance. There are former styles, copies of styles called styles, the latter which are regional variations. Old reproductions often mix styles. Yesterday's fakes and frauds frequently mix regional characteristics of today or at a newer time. Number 2, looking in books. No matter how many, you cannot alone suffice on one, but books can take you back and track down the evidence in a museum. If possible, select a museum with a fairly large collection, with great breadth and reach. As you have already done in looking at pictures, first view each object in its entirety, then step forward to see each of its several elements at close range. Only then you should consult the label. In your first view, while gauging the delicacy and heftiness of the design, its curviness or rectilinearity, note how width and the line are combined to form a congruent example. A boxy pattern may be broad and ponderous or slender and attenuated. Some rounded shapes and flattened balls seem heavy. Vertical ovals appear light. Some legs appear to bear their load easily, while others seem to strain at the support of great heft. Concentrate on distinct elements of design, the surface decoration, legs, feet, hardware, motifs, shapes, and woods. Each time you look at an antique, ask yourself, what is the date, or what is its style or period? Date an object from its latest feature, not by any older one that may endure, and years after the heyday may be found in combination with newer and more stylish elements. You must decide on the period in order to answer the next questions. Do the proportions conform to those of the period? A common alteration to antique cases early in this century was to diminish their size to make them more suitable for smaller 20th century houses and apartments. Old how-to literature included instructions for narrowing such typical broad cases such as Chippendale chests and Federal sideboards. Many makers of old reproductions copied period details, but catered to their contemporaries' taste in scale. Rare proportions are particularly suspected. Was the form of furniture made in that era? Was a Chippendale TV table made in that period? This question helps you very quickly identify some reproductions and a few antiques of the old part new object type, such as the lower half of a 17th century cupboard posing as a sideboard. What are the most stylistic details on an antique? If anything was added after the antique's original production, it is likely to fall into this category. Is the construction consistent with the period? Were the tools used those of the period? Do you see planer marks, router marks, joiner marks, etc.? Number 3, the detailed study of regional variations, which includes books and magazines, provide good training in style, recognition, and regional peculiarities. It is important to accustom your eye to regional styles to see the characteristics the object from one area to have as common. All furniture makers develop patterns distinctive to their locales. A Newport block front chest with Philadelphia carvings is obviously suspect. This is good evidence. One does not need a science lab to pin down the material evidence provided by wood, wood tools, wood fasteners, and wood fashion. Materials and furniture making techniques have changed over the years. These innovations are datable. A few dates memorized can put you in a major advantage when trying to date. Cut nails were first manufactured in 1790. And oak was split during the 17th century, not sawn. You can date the start of a new technology, but not the end of an old one. Old technology is seldom lost. Craftsmen can still cast nails and split wood. So never use the presence of an old technique or material as proof of antiquity. The journey a nail took into the wood substrate can give evidence if it was there for a long time. As the process of corrosion occurs, as the wrought nail oxidizes, it blackens the surrounding wood. Also examine the indentation of the head, the compression into the wood surface. Old wrought nails leave an irregular shape. Iron corrosion rings are larger and darker when oak is the substrate due to the high tannin content. Carbon dating, C14, measuring radioactivity, is appropriate for prehistoric determinations, but does not help with age determination of antique furniture. Although infrared lighting or Photography can aid us in determining original notes or sketches, particularly under a painted surface. Radiography, or X-rays, lets us see inside the wood to spot hidden nails or screws holding a part together. Your local vet or dentist may aid you in a small fee for using the X-ray handheld items if possible. Ultraviolet or black light can show restoration, overpainting or added makeup or faking.